Some of you will know of Phil and Sarah. They're actually just back leading worship this weekend on our live stream, so we're delighted to have them. Last week, after Sunday Mass, they sent me a short video clip of their daughter, Rose. Now, this was just as SPP Kids Online Church was getting started. And I'm going to play this video clip for you, and as you watch it, I want you to think of that line from the Gospel today, which reads, "I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You have hidden these things from the wise and the learned and revealed them to infants." All right, so let's go to that clip.
For Laura O'Rourke and for SPP Kids Online Church, so stick around.
Come on out.
What's up, my friends?
I love that. It's like she's just totally into it. By the way, to translate, she's saying Laura, who is our kids minister. Now, I just want to say I've watched that clip over and over and over again, and you might not have caught it, but her little brother Samuel is in the background. He's just chilling, and I'm sure he's saying, "I don't know where Rose gets all of her energy from." You know, it's so beautiful to see little ones filled with energy, filled with joy. And it makes me wonder, how come as we get older, these things get hidden from us? They're lost. You know, it seems like the older we get, whether adults or even teenagers, the weight of the world starts to fall and bear down upon our shoulders. I can certainly feel it. What about you? Does anybody else feel weary, heavy, depressed, or even burned out? I mean, we can feel these things at the best of times, but even now, especially now, in this time of pandemic, for the last 3 or 4 months, we've been burdened by so much stuff around the world. I think so many kids, they sleep for like 12 hours a day. Meanwhile, as adults, we've been watching and following the 24-hour news cycle, and we've been carrying the weight of global uncertainty, internalizing so much of the pain, so much of the suffering that has been happening. I know for myself, I've had my moments. Just recently, I was talking to my Divine Renovation coach. Her name is Fiona. She's absolutely brilliant. I was seeking feedback on a particular thing, and she gave me some great advice. And then she said this, just to name it, "You are very tired." And as soon as she said that, I experienced this profound relief. And two things. First of all, it's like somebody else noticed. And secondly, it gave me permission. It was like, oh, it's okay to feel tired. It's okay. And I suspect I'm not the only one watching right now who is feeling this sense of weariness. In light of all the heaviness we've been experiencing throughout these last number of months, we decided that we would begin a new preaching series. It's called In Your Head, a preaching series about mental health. Now, right from the get-go, as I'm speaking into the subject, I realize I want to give a huge disclaimer. I'm not a professional, and so I'm bound to say things that are maybe slightly incorrect, or no matter what I say, it's going to be incomplete. But I want to take the risk to go there. We want to do this and speak into us because we believe that the church should be part of the conversation, that Jesus actually has something meaningful to say about mental health. Now, I'm not going to give a lecture on the subject. In fact, my first draft of this homily, it was over 35 minutes long. So the last thing I want to do is add to the weariness that you might already be feeling. However, I do believe that the Bible has truths that can teach us about how to respond to issues, struggles with our mental health. And I am learning as we go. Just the other day, I was on a call with a couple of physicians, and they were explaining to me the difference between mental illness and mental health. On the one hand, mental illness refers to a condition often a little bit more severe or more prolonged that is clinically diagnosed by a professional. But mental health is this all-encompassing term that basically we all have mental health. In the same way, we all have physical health. And our physical health can go through ups and downs. So too, our mental health can go through ups and downs. Now today, I want to speak specifically about weariness, about being heavy burdened, about depression, and about burnout. And even as I begin, I realize these are such complex, related, but not exactly identical topics. Take depression as one example. There's so many different kinds. I think of what's called seasonal affective disorder, SAD. It's something that, especially for those of us here in Nova Scotia, we can experience because through most of the winter, we go through long stretches without enough sunlight, and that can affect us. Or the situation of depression that's called postpartum depression. So many mothers, after giving birth, they experience a kind of depression, which is further, already they're feeling down, and then there's an added shame because society is saying, hey, this is supposed to be the happiest moment of your life. And it's like, why do I feel so sad? And then there's chronic depression that could be caused because of a chemical imbalance in the brain. And then there are others who might say, from time to time, I feel depressed. And so my point is, there's a whole spectrum just on the subject of depression alone. And I can't possibly speak to all of it. But from the get-go, I want to say two things. I think there are at least two things that are very unhelpful in this conversation. And the first is this. And by the way, when I talk about depression, I love this definition I got from a friend of mine. Just to make it really simple, depression is a sadness that doesn't make sense. Now, these two things that I think we should try to avoid, when people have not struggled with mental health issues, they might expect that it's as simple as, well, just flip a switch, turn it off, just change your attitude or something like that. Think of the analogy of cancer. If you find out that somebody has cancer, you're not going to just say, hey, get over it. It's not such a big deal. Just change your attitude. No, we realize this is serious. It could be even very dangerous, and it requires proper treatment. Maybe chemotherapy or radiation or surgery. Well, when there's mental health struggles, we need to have a similar response. This is serious, maybe even dangerous, and we need to respond with appropriate kinds of treatments. Things like helping people establish good, healthy habits, perhaps counseling, modifying thoughts, behaviors, maybe medication. These are all things that when appropriately used, can help to respond to struggles. The point is this: we can't just tell people to snap out of it as if that will fix the problem. Mental health struggles are invisible, but they are very much real in the same way that physical health struggles are real. The second thing I want to caution us against, and especially for those of us in the church as Christians, it's really unhelpful when we tell people they just need to pray harder, right? That's not what we want to do. Because what that communicates is somehow, if you were just praying hard enough, God would heal you. He would take this away from you. Now, I do know of people who have been healed of all kinds of things, and I also know of people who have not been healed. And there's a certain mystery to all of that. But the last thing we want to do is communicate a further burden or a further shame on people who are already feeling like they're not good enough. And now we're saying, well, you're not holy enough because you're not praying hard enough. So let's avoid those things from the outset. As I said, today, I want to speak in a general way, not as a medical professional, but as a priest. I want to speak in a general way about weariness, about heaviness, about depression, about burnouts. Now, the thing we should realize is this: these are not new issues. In fact, Jesus could see the effects of these in the people of his day. He was talking to people who were weary and heavy burdened. Now, for us today, as I said, we're feeling perhaps heavy because of COVID-19, but for them, in their time, it was because of the Pharisees, these people who had said, they had been placing upon them all these laws, all these rules, all these burdens. These were the wise and the learned. Now, remember Rose from the beginning? Full of joy, full of energy. Well, the Pharisees, they had no joy, and all of their energy was directed, was focused on adding more laws to the Ten Commandments, which ended up exhausting people. So much so that basically, I think being a religious person meant being exhausted, being burdened. And Jesus came into that situation, and he said, it doesn't have to be that way. The problem isn't religion. There's a healthy way that we can respond. And he throws out this amazing invitation. He says, come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Maybe the most consoling line of the whole Bible. Come to me, all you who are weary and who are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. He goes on to say, take my yoke. Now, a yoke was this wooden thing that would go over the shoulders of a beast of burden, right? And you might be thinking, wait a minute, I thought Jesus just said, if you follow me, if you come to me, you don't have to work. Don't worry about it. It feels like a bait and switch. No, actually, what he says is this: following Jesus, it will involve work, it will involve some degree of effort, but it's not meant to leave you feeling exhausted and completely burdened. He says, learn from me, and you will find rest for your souls. There's a kind of rest that Jesus wants to offer us that is so much more profound than merely physical rest. He wants to give us a rest, a mental rest, even a spiritual rest in him. Now, note this. As Jesus is talking to them, he doesn't say that, he's saying, come to me. What he doesn't say is this: stay by yourselves, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and try harder to rest. As if to say, you know what? First of all, I think the first thing we can learn is if you're exhausted, if you find your motivation is low, you can't seem to do anything, you're weary, don't stay by yourself. Reach out. Reach out to Jesus. Reach out to somebody else. Don't stay isolated. And furthermore, he's not saying you need to try harder to rest. What he's saying is that rest is something that I will give you. Rest is received. Just say that with me. Rest is received. This is such an important point. We don't have to try to achieve it or work at it or earn it or take it for ourselves. No, rest is meant to be a gift that we receive. It's not about me and me alone making it happen. It's about something that Jesus wants to offer us for free. Now, as I talk about this, I realize I actually happen to know quite a bit about this subject, but unfortunately, it's not because I'm a huge success story. In fact, I could write the book on how to not receive rest from Jesus. But speaking of books, I do want to recommend a book that is excellent on this subject. It's written by Carey Nieuwhof, Didn't See It Coming. And he actually shares very vulnerably and honestly about his own struggle with depression and burnout. He's a church leader from Canada. He works and lives a little bit north of Toronto, and he's an amazing inspiration to so many leaders. He's convinced that there's an epidemic, or maybe a pandemic, of burnout, or what he calls low-grade burnout. He says this: "By that I mean the joy of life is gone, but the functions of life continue. You're not dead, but you're certainly not feeling fully alive." Anybody else resonate with that? And he gives a bunch of signs of that you might be approaching burnout. You've lost passion. You no longer feel the highs and the lows. You're not productive. You sleep. You take time off, and yet you're not actually getting recharged. And he warns about something called self-medication. Here's a quote: "This might involve overeating, overworking, sexual addictions, drinking, impulsive spending, or even drugs. When this occurs, you've chosen a path of self-medication instead of self-care to deal with the pain." Now, one of my big temptations is overwork. And I was actually starting to feel it a couple months into this pandemic. It was about mid-May. I remember being in this meeting with the leadership team, and we're there, and we decided, let's write up on the whiteboard a bunch of wins that we've experienced as a team, as a staff, over these first 2 months of being in lockdown. And we came up, without even trying, we came up with 15 different things on the board. And I was sitting there looking at the list, and I remember thinking, my brain is registering these things, but there's like a malfunction in my heart. I'm not feeling excited. In fact, I'm not feeling anything. I was feeling numb in that moment. And it started to worry me, so much so that the next day, I actually took it to prayer. And I want to read from you. I'm going to share pretty vulnerably here, right from this is my prayer journal, from an entry from May the 15th. "Dear Jesus, I'm feeling weary. I'm taking myself too seriously. I'm consistently in a bad mood. Even when the staff around me are trying to cheer me up and encourage me, give me perspective, I'm not having it. We put up 15 wins on the board from the last 2 months. I couldn't get excited about them. Not good," underlined. That was mid-May. I knew that I needed to do something, and so I ended up doing 3 things in response: prayer, share, and receive rest. Those were the 3 things. And I just want to walk you through that. I took this time of prayer. I went to God with this burden that I was feeling. And later in that same journal entry, I actually scribbled down one of my favorite passages. Maybe it'll be familiar to you. Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." And I just rested in that promise of Jesus. The second thing I did is I shared. I went to my brother, Companions of the Cross priests, and I said, "Hey, listen, this happened. It's actually concerning me a little bit. Something's off." And I don't recommend just sharing with anybody, but share with those who you are close to, who you trust, who love you, and who will help. And they certainly did. And the third thing was to receive rest. I had to make a plan right then and there to book in some rest. And I found out that one of my brothers, the very next week, was going to be taking a week-long retreat up at a friend's cottage. And so I decided, you know what, maybe I'll tag along. And at first, I didn't want to impose or be a burden or whatever, and I realized I just needed to accept. I just needed to receive. And so I went along, and I was able to experience several days in a row to disconnect. No Wi-Fi, no tech, deep rest. Just sitting by a wood stove with a nice book in the middle of nature. It was a tremendous gift, and it really helped me to recharge. Now, I offer all of this to you, not because I want to draw any more attention to myself, but I hope that you could learn something from this example. I'm still learning as I go. But if there's anybody out there, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling weary, if you're feeling depressed or burnt out, I just want you to know it's okay. It's normal, and especially the last 4 months that we've had, I'd be surprised if you weren't feeling a little bit down. And I just offer you these 3 suggestions: prayer, share, receive rest. Go to God in prayer. Jesus is inviting us. He says, "Come to me. I will give you rest." And when we pray, it's just so important that we not try to dress things up perfectly. God loves it when we come to him raw and can just be real with him. The second thing is share. To take the courage, take that step to share. If you're struggling, to share it with somebody else that you trust, a friend, a family member, maybe your parents, maybe if you don't have somebody like that, maybe it's a doctor or a professional, to take that step to share. They say that a problem shared is a problem cut in half. And I really believe that. And finally, to choose to receive rest. So important. When I was in that moment and I needed some rest, I actually had to depend. I asked Father Alex if he would pick up a bit of the slack around the parish while I was away for a few days. And at first I kind of felt guilty about that, but I had to receive the gift, receive the opportunity to go and get some rest, because it was the most important thing that I needed. Now I realize that rest can look different for all kinds of people. In every day, every week, I get rest in different ways. I love getting outside, sitting out in the sun and just reading. I love going out for long bike rides. I occasionally get out and cut some firewood. The priest on the right-hand side, Father Eve, is one of my brothers, and he's a professional lumberjack, and so he takes us out once in a while. But there's all different kinds of ways that we can unwind and disconnect. And we have to choose to do it, to take those opportunities for rest. I want to end with this. If you're watching right now, and you're feeling especially burdened, if you've been struggling in some way, maybe you're asking yourself, does anybody else out there know what I'm going through? Is there anybody else who even cares? I want you to know this. The answer is yes. Jesus knows you, and he loves you immensely. He is calling you to himself. He says, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest."